will be the fifth increase in student fees over the last 4 years. By fall 2012, tuition fees will have risen from $30.48 a year in the year 2008 to $59.70 in the year 2012. That's an increase of 96% over 4 years. No wonder students were upset. So what was the reaction of the CSU board to this full house of students, faculty, and staff? During the debate over whether or not to raise student fees again, Trustee Roberta Achtenberg declared that she was going to vote for the fee increase. So far, fine. Obviously, you have a right to vote any way you want. But she said, quote, I couldn't care less, end quote, what students, faculty, and staff thought about that vote. You know, that was the first problem. Her statement led to the first outburst from the audience. Some students stood up and protested loudly what Roberta Achtenberg said. Things went downhill after that. Some people tried to speak who weren't on the speakers list. Some people were running a bit over their arbitrary 3-minute time limit. The chair, Herb Carter, had no flexibility. Some people were not allowed their right to speak. That led to more unrest. He then he declared a 10-minute recess. Things then got out of hand. There was no message from the chair of the board or the chancellor telling people where to go or what to do. There were conflicting messages from the police. Some of us were told to leave the room. Some of us were told to sit down. Those that were told to leave the room could not because the exits were blocked because of pushing and shoving matches that were taking place between the students and police. Then some of us were told the meeting was canceled. Others learned that the meeting, in fact, had reconvened in private in the smaller room. Several of us tried to gain access to that room. I was one of them. I was denied my right to participate in a supposedly public hearing. CSU cites the Bagley-Keene Act as the reason they were allowed to reconvene their meeting in private. They claim the law allows them to bar people who are participating in so-called disturbances. Interestingly, today in Los Angeles, in the Superior Court, there's a first hearing on a lawsuit brought by a student protesting the fee increase behind closed doors. In a declaration, in the court filings, CSU contends that the leaders of the two biggest CSU unions, CFA, which represents faculty, and my union, which represents support staff, were barred from attending the closed session because they disrupted the board meeting. What they say that representatives of organized labor, the disruption that they allude to is that we got up during the public comment and chanted in an organized manner. We chanted demands in a very dramatic moment. They call it a disruption. Any impartial review of the day's proceedings will show that the disruption began after the labor's 3 minutes of comment. In the opinion piece in Sunday's Sacramento Bee, CSU blames external groups for mob violence and destruction of property. They blame students for the breakage of one of the large glass entrance doors to the Board of Trustees room. In fact, videos posted on YouTube clearly show that the glass breakage was due to a police officer leaning against a baton that had been placed inside the door handle by one of the officers. There was no mob violence. Another important point on use of pepper spray. There's an executive order, 756. I only have 2 copies. I'll leave you here. It talks about the use of weapons by campus police. Page 6 describes the use of pepper spray. It says that when situations require that the use of pepper spray be that pepper spray be used, it should be sprayed in 1-second bursts and should not be used repeatedly on any one individual or for long periods of time. The YouTube videos clearly show a violation of the CSU's own policy. We must do better than this. Just like UC Davis has developed a task force to investigate what went wrong at the events at UC Davis on November 18, the CSU should also put together a task force to investigate. And I support those of you who've called for an independent investigation. Thank you for your time. And one more comment, and that is, if this was Long Beach and the Board of Trustees meeting, and and it was advertised at 10 o'clock, we may have started at 9 o'clock, because they believe they have the right to start meetings earlier than the published times. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Next member of the public.
Hello. I'm a student at UC Davis. I'm a senior there. And I just...
Can you introduce your name?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My name is Jerica Heinze. And I've heard a lot of, talk today, a lot of really productive talk. However, I still wanted to address the main issue that brought me and my peers out to the quad on the 17th, November 17th. And that is that by raising the tuition and by the 81% tuition hikes, what you're doing is indirectly, or actually directly, shaping the demographic of those who are going to be receiving a higher education and a college degree in this state and in this country. And so, by making it so that, we really feel that we are going to be the last generation of low-income students, transcending the ladder and making something better for ourselves. So I really just want to remind everyone here that, when it comes to education, please make us a priority. And we really want to know, why is it that this state has in its top priority prison spending while education is well in the 40th percentile? Thank you.
Next person.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I'm sure you're hungry. So my name is Ashley Wardle. I'm a TA at San Diego State University. I am also one of the 4 students that have been discussed. I was arrested. And I don't know what I look like to you, but I'm not an outside agitator. I am a student, I'm a TA, and I had every right to be there. Let's see. Yeah, so I am a member of UAW 4123. That's the union that represents TAs, GAs, and tutors for the CSU system. So members from there created this protest, and I joined the protest to protest the potential 9% fee increase, along with students from the UC's system, activists, community members, and others who have a stake in the CSU. I decided to participate in the protest because, as a teacher, I teach my students that education is a human right and it's not reserved for those who can pay for it. So I wanted to be there to stand up and practice what I preach, and I apparently did a good job because my students felt that and came with me. So I brought about 10 of my students with me. I was arrested with one of them. Yes. Skipping right along. You're welcome. So that morning the meeting was actually closed before the room was filled to capacity. So my students and I were outside chanting when the meeting room was cleared during an open meeting under instruction of Chancellor Reed. In an attempt to clear the room and the courtyard where myself and others were, the police engaged in unnecessary amount of force. They shoved students from behind with no warnings, and pepper spray was sprayed into the crowd. The police officers at the meeting were actually from all the different CSU campuses, so there was a huge amount of disorganization between them. There was no clear leadership. They did not use any amplified sound to let us know their expectations. They did not warn us before the pepper spray shot into my eyes. There was nothing done ahead of time. So I was actually in the front of the crowd hoping to go into the meeting as it was shut down. So I was in the front chanting, and I was pulled into the foyer by my backpack after I had been arrested, put on my stomach, hogtied, and put in handcuffs. This is actually a violation of Executive Order 756 that says it is harmful to somebody's health to pepper spray them and then lay them on their stomach. So just wanted you to know that that's what the CSU cops were engaging in that day. And furthermore, I'd like to rebuke Dr. Johnson's comments. I personally did not witness anybody pepper spraying police officers, and I was right in the front. I haven't seen any video, so if you can find the documentation, let me know, because I haven't seen it. And you already know about the glass door, so I'll move on from there. The 2 students arrested with me have similar stories of the way the police So Chancellor Reed has decided not to come today, and he's also deciding to continue pressing charges after our arraignment. He hired a private investigator and is trying to move forward in these trumped-up charges against us, these unwarranted charges. Just yesterday, myself and my student were notified that we'll be facing conduct hearings at San Diego State University in addition to whatever will be happening in Long Beach. So I would just like to ask you a personal appeal. Consider what message is being sent when students are faced with trumped-up charges when they practice their First Amendment rights. What are we telling students when they face all of these hearings and all of these charges for simply being there? We're telling them, don't do it. Don't exercise your First Amendment rights. Don't practice democracy because you might get arrested and face charges which will be on your record forever. Furthermore, Chancellor Reed was responsible for setting the tone that day, deciding how the police should respond, and I believe he made an error in judgment. It is my opinion that peace officers should be there to make sure both students and administrators are safe in an environment where both feel able to express their opinions. As Chancellor of the CSU system, it should be Reed's job to advocate to you on our behalf. It should be his job to seek funding for affordable, quality education for all of us. Until that happens, until tuition increases end, until class sizes stop raising at the same time as executive compensation, until all those things end, I will continue to protest, and I'm bringing students with me. Because I believe in the necessity of affordable, quality education. I would like to protest knowing that police are there to keep me safe, not to arrest me when an arrest is unwarranted. So I'd like to thank Lieutenant Governor Newsom, who's not here today, for his efforts in ensuring our safety and timely release once we were actually taken into custody. And I would like to thank you personally for having this hearing, listening to what I have to say as one of the arrested. I also have an open letter that we wrote to Chancellor Reed addressing some of these things. 30 student groups have signed on to it, more than 30 at this point have signed on to it, saying that they agree with it, and we have not heard anything back from Chancellor Reed, so I'd like you to take a look at this as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I believe we already have a copy of the letter, all the members.
All right.
I think we do, but if not, please give it to the sergeant.
I'll just leave some.
No, give it to the sergeant so
I'll
that
give it
the
to the
sergeant,
sergeant.
we want to get it in the official record. We have two last speakers. Welcome.
Hello. I'll keep it brief. My name is Amy Champ. I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate in performance studies at UC Davis and a former lecturer in U.S. government at Sac City College in Sac State. So I have a pretty good understanding of how the various institutions work in terms of their roles with the California Master Plan for Higher Education. And I think really what we're seeing here is I have prepared my own investigation without a dime of taxpayer money. I started documenting student protests back in 2007 when I became a graduate student. I've been a member of the Green Party for 20 years, and I was interested in the Berkeley Tree Sit as an ecological action. It became the longest-running urban tree sit in America, and so through my documentation efforts, I learned a lot about the use of UC Police Department. And what I think we're seeing here is if we can kind of telescope out and look at the situation, you have an institution that has their own police department. So when we go on strike, they have their own police to send to our picket line. If a corporation had their own police department, right, on a picket line, it would be very different than if you call the regular police department and say, we have a strike going on here, like what happened at the Port of Oakland a couple days ago. The picket walked around, the arbitrator came in and said it's not safe for workers, they're picketing, it's called off, right? So I have documented a lot of cases that people have already mentioned, but of the UC police, just time and time again, acting to undermine the rule of law and to undermine the Bill of Rights. And I think that, you need to see that for what it is, an institution having its own police department. And secondly, to just second the governor's recommendation to take a look at the training that our officers are using and what Yamada and Skinner alluded to in terms of the climate that we're faced now with the Occupy movement. And we really believe as campus activists, I had my class at the encampment the night before, in solidarity. The tents were only there for 24 hours, so the idea that it posed a health threat, is really non-existent. Most of the outside agitators are alumni and people that organize events on our campus regularly. So, we're just really being repressed in terms of we are speaking out against the regents, we are speaking out against the administration. So that's pretty obvious. The other thing I really want you guys to know, I have in here a list of the 12 faculty departments, and of course you've seen the various petitions, 200 for, 200 against. The faculty are very disturbed. There is a lot of unrest in the just the whole institution of UC Davis right now, and so there's the faculty are really siding with the students in a lot of ways, and they feel very undermined by militarization on campus. After the pepper spray event, we called for a strike on Monday. My union called for a strike on Monday, so we did that. We had the big rally that was even on Al Jazeera. The administration building at UC Davis then went into partial lockdown. So Marac Hall, the building where I go to see the Dean of Graduate Studies, faculty were being demanded to show their ID by student police officers at the front of the building. If you were a student, you could not enter that building without an appointment, and you needed a police student escort throughout the building. Okay, this is the building where Chancellor Katehi works. There's a letter in here from an agriculture professor who's been a professor for 40 years at the institution who really feels that this post-pepper spray environment has become, it's pretty militarized. So there's a lot of complaints all around, and I just want you to know that the environment is still very, very contentious. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. And then we have one last speaker.
Hello, thank you very much for taking the time and interest to hold this hearing today. My name is John Herring, and I am a graduate student here at Sacramento State University. I'm also with the Academic Student Employees Union, UAW 4123. I was at the protest in Long Beach at the Chancellor's office. Just a couple points, nothing major. At this point to add, given that quite a bit of it's already been covered. I was also near the front. I saw nothing in the way of pepper spray from protesters directed at police. I did not see protesters strike police in any way either, and I've reviewed a number of videos online and haven't seen anything indicating that. One additional item in violation of the code that has been brought forward, the Chancellor's directive. When the arrests were being made, one of the protesters was gotten on top of by a police officer who stuck his knee into her back while he was cuffing her, and that additionally is in violation of that item that's already been brought to your attention. Also wanted to make the point that we had, prior to the event, designated somebody to act as police liaison on our behalf. He introduced himself to Chief Johnson on the way in and was standing nearby. We also had people who were prepared to act as crowd control on our behalf, and neither Chief Johnson nor any of the other police that were present communicated with our liaison or in any other way made use of that crowd control that we had available. So something to bear in mind. We feel that we've made an effort. As fees continue to go up, we'll certainly continue to protest as things become more difficult for our members, and we pledge to do that peacefully, and appreciate, again, your time.
Thank you. Our last member of the community.
Hello, my name is Nora Walker, and I'm from Sacramento State, and I would like to talk about the university's decision to use police force to end a peaceful sit-in that we had in April of this year. Our sit-in was peaceful, classes were held, and Assemblymember Pan came down and spoke to us while we were there. During our sit-in, we as students had open communication lines to our police and to our administration. Never in the 3 days that we were in the building did school administration or our campus police inform us that we were in any violation or in violation of any campus policy. We directly asked Mike Lee, Vice Provost, if our presence could possibly lead to the arrest of students or any type of police action. The only response we received was that staying in the building could not be good for our health because it was hot, because the school shut off the AC. Even when directly asked if we were breaking any policy, the administration could not give us a clear answer. At 3:30 in the morning on Saturday, April 16th, we had 23 students who were asleep in the building. We were woken up by about 30 police officers in full riot gear. When speaking to our police liaison, we were told to vacate the building within 5 minutes, and we were threatened with the use of force if we did not. All of the students left peacefully, and it was then that the police informed us that we were trespassing. It was not until riot police showed up on Saturday morning that we were informed that we were breaking any kind of policy, even though we had asked directly many times. The following week, 4 students, myself included, received an email from the school saying we were facing disciplinary action. The school charged us with breaking the no camping policy, which is also considered trespassing, so we were told we were breaking state law as well. We violated time, place, and manner, and we failed to comply. The only reason the 4 of us were targeted was because our names had been used in the local media as we had granted interviews. Eventually, the school dropped the failure to comply because they acknowledged that no one from the police or the administration had directly told us that we were in violation of these policies. Therefore, that was when, during the disciplinary action is when we were given notice of these policies, and therefore the school let us off with a verbal warning. What I would like the committee to walk away with is that although there were ample opportunity for the university administration to communicate when we were in violation of policies and that there would be possible consequences, instead they chose not to answer our questions and instead sent in riot police at 3:30 in the morning to use the threat of force to end a peaceful sit-in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it back. Are there any members, Assembly Member Skinner, that wish to make a final statement?
Thanks. I want to thank staff and the co-chairs for holding this. It was very, very good. And I really appreciate the public comment because things came out in the comment that it's just the nature of it. We had a great set of panelists and we got a lot of good information, but in the public comment we were brought further very important information that I think deserves follow-up. The whole issue of the health impacts of pepper spray really does deserve follow-up, even if it is useful or rather, very low harm on a person that's fully able-bodied.
Which we don't know.
Right, we don't know, but let's, whatever, we don't know what it is for other people. And obviously, if I'm going to use pepper spray, I can't tell whether you, may have some kind of compromised circumstance. The other thing I think is very, very important for us to look at further is this whole issue, what I call almost the double jeopardy of if we've got laws, actual laws. We've got police codes, which the police follow, whether they're UC, CSU, or state, because there's the whole public, I'm sorry if I'm forgetting our code, but yes, put both post standards in our own state of code, penal code, excuse me, yes, thank you. But then you've got this, extra set of either whether it's time, place, and manner, or code of conduct, or whatever, that can be at odds with the penal code. And certainly if you're a person on the campus, whether you're a faculty, staff, or student, I mean, there shouldn't be this double standard of rules, or at least rules in a way that in effect can be used to repress any kind of legitimate protest. And then the other thing I think that is worth looking at is this definition of disruption. And again, what are the legal issues versus and the legal rights to basically prevent disruption versus the kind of arbitrary, which I think gets at a lot of what we've been hearing about. The conflict comes to sort of, when somebody decides, I don't longer want this disruption. The last point I want to make was we got into a bit of us and them where a lot of, yes, a campus police force, regardless of the nature of the campus, exists, yes, to protect students, but it exists for many other purposes. And at any different event, there are more than students. There are faculty, there are staff, there are community members. And so this, again, double rule around the students versus if we take the UC Berkeley circumstance where there the batons were used, our former poet laureate, Robert Haas, who's a professor there, and his wife were batoned. So I want to make sure that whatever policies are put into place, that we're viewing it, that there's more than just students at risk here. And I don't mean that to minimize that we don't want to hurt students, but rather I want to make sure that we don't fall into, which often can happen in a campus setting, of this in loco parentis, where there has to be some kind of special rule for students. And I think in most cases, while we do have students at our campuses that are under 18, basically the majority are adults, and we need to have a common set of rules.
Anyone else that wishes?
Well,
Assemblymember Yamada.
Thank you very much. I, too, want to thank the two co-chairs and all the staff, everyone who participated today for this very now 4.5-hour-long hearing. I think it just shows that there's a lot more that we need to hear. And while we are awaiting the results of these multiple simultaneous investigations, I am increasingly concerned as the students return to campus after the winter break and into the spring and summer, that our budget discussions and the increasing polarization about the debate regarding revenue at the federal and state level, we all have to be mindful of how interrelated all of these discussions are. And we have to model the best in our own ethical and honest and calm behavior as we continue to try to resolve some of these very, very difficult discussions. I just want to thank everyone, and thank you for allowing me to participate today.
Assemblymember Blanc.
I, too, want to thank my co-chair, Senator Lowenthal, and the staffs both in the Senate and Assembly committees for the fine work and the long hours you spent. Preparation, getting the witnesses here, a lot of planning went into this. I think it was a very valuable event, and thank you all. I want to thank my colleagues for attending. A lot of us are not in Sacramento this time of year, so it is a bit of a sacrifice to come in for hearings. So thanks to those who are still here and those who attended earlier. And again, to the witnesses and those both on panels and who testified, appreciate all your input. This is important. I mean, that's why we're here, because we believe it's important that we get this all sorted out. There are a lot of takeaways from today, and our staffs have been taking notes furiously, and there will be follow-up from today, a lot of follow-up. Two things in particular I want to make sure we follow up on. With the UC, I do want to make sure we follow up on President Yudoff's promise to look into the pepper spray issue and whether, in fact, pepper spray does whether it does impose some kind of health problems, health concerns, and to do an independent investigation of that, along with the other things he's doing. With CSU, I do want to ask that we send Chancellor Reed a letter expressing what I think is a very badly needed external review of what happened at the Board of Trustees meeting. And I look forward to his response to that request.
Thank you. I'll just end by saying I, too, want to thank the co-chairs for an excellent presentation, and also really the staff who really worked on both the Assembly. I think this is an example of the Assembly and the Senate working together, I think, in a bipartisan way. I think it was very, very productive. I think that all members here felt listened to. I think that while our focus, I just want to end with one thing. While our focus is on really looking at the policies and the procedures that underline those, and whether they are the most equitable and the fairest policies, do we both protect the rights of students to engage in free speech, and at the same time, how do we protect the well-being, the safety and well-being of the campus, and that balance. I want to say that what I've also listened to and heard, that it's not just the policies and procedures, but it's how they're administered also. That comes through real clearly. That policies can be done either to protect the well-being of the campus community or to harass those whose opinions disagree with ours. And I think that, too, has to be sorted out, that we do not want these policies to be the next stage of increasing the distance between students and the universities in which they attend. And I think the other issue that's obviously very critical that comes out to me as a member of the Budget Committee and also a chair of Senate Education is that I do not want to see us pitting one group against the others. We need additional resources. We need additional resources. As Assemblymember Skinner pointed out, it is very hard to talk about what we're funding when we've cut dramatically in the last 4 years, dramatically, the amount of revenues that are coming in. It's not only that we've cut, but those revenues have dropped dramatically, in part because of actions done by the governor, previous governor, in part because the legislature has not been able to deal with that loss of revenue. But that really is the critical issue. I am glad that we are moving that discussion, in part, not totally, from the campus to the State House. With that, I thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.